My name is Meg Keating, and I'm from the School of Creative Arts and Media at the University of Tasmania. Tasmania is an island state south of mainland Australia with a population of around 550,000. The entire state is classified as regional. I am meeting you today online from Lutruwita, Tasmania. I acknowledge with deep respect the traditional owners of this land, the Palawa people. I'd also like to acknowledge my fellow collaborators on this project, Nick Rubenis, Senior Lecturer in Design, Stephen Carson, Lecturer in Art, and Andy Terrell, Associate Lecturer in Media. And I'd like to introduce you to the PET project. The PET project is a project that brings together people, pets, and art. Today's presentation will discuss what happens when you take a successful pilot project on tour in regional centres across a regional state. Our presentation will focus on one workshop in Swansea, a town on the east coast of Tasmania, with a population of just under 800 people and an hour and a half drive from the capital, Hobart. The presentation will begin with a brief overview of the PET project. I will then go on to describe circumstances and personalities that, when combined, led to what our project team described as a workshop failure. I will then discuss how we recovered from this workshop and how we overhauled the model and preceding workshops. What is the PET project? Briefly, what we do is offer a free intensive one-day workshop to any community member interested in painting a portrait of their much-loved pet and whom are willing to share stories about their animal-human relationships. We supply everything that is needed, equipment, materials, and instruction free of charge to help ensure the workshop is inclusive of anyone who wishes to join in, regardless of physical, social, and financial means. The PET project, in essence, is a model of creative pedagogical enterprise that aims to establish and maintain creative community of practices across regional Tasmania. The intent of this project is to promote fundamental sustainability imperatives in different communities where the care for and maintenance of relationships are at the fore of public engagement. One of our key strategies is to develop a pedagogical model that not only advocates for creativity and culture, but also concurrently provides diverse participants access to mentoring, education, training, and resources. We do this because the Australian Bureau of Statistics and the Tasmanian government says that Tasmania has the lowest rates of literacy and numeracy and engagement in higher education in Australia. We established the PET project in 2020. It was in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The project was set up to address both the demand for public engagement with art practices to support well-being and a need to provide direct employment, mentorship, resources, and ongoing support for artists working in regional areas. Our research question for the project is how to prepare social connections and cohesion, address well-being factors, and understand what this might look like as a creative pedagogical model, one that provides skills, opportunities, and meaningful outcomes for people. It was under this aim that the project team deemed the Swansea workshop a failure. As we conduct the workshops, we interview participants about their relationship with their animals and ask them a range of questions and encourage them to share stories and anecdotes about their relationship with their pets. Questions such as, if your pet could talk, what would they say about you? And how has your pet helped you? As part of the workshop, we employ, mentor, and provide all resources for an established and an emerging artist to support the facilitation of the workshops, 2 artists per workshop. They are supported by the project team before, during, and after the delivery of the workshop. In supplying them with the resources and other engagement activities, we hope that they are able to take the model, build upon it, and continue to deliver workshops and opportunities in their own communities. We also interview participating artists about the role of creativity, the value of community arts, well-being and health, and any insights about their own practice. After conducting 3 very successful workshops within the School of Creative Arts and Media in Hobart, we applied for funding to take the workshop around the state. The funding provided travel and the payment of local artists within the communities. This enabled 7 different workshops in 7 different regional towns, working with 14 locally based, established and emerging artists. Our first workshop on the tour was in the East Coast regional town of Swansea. We made inquiries and booked the Swansea Courthouse as our venue. It was privately owned. Through personal contacts, we got in touch with an established artist who lived about an hour and 15 minutes away from Swansea. Our established artist recommended the emerging artist who did live in Swansea. Our emerging artist was very proactive in promoting the workshop, and we had a full registration of participants, 16 participants in total with the 2 artists. There are 2 components of the workshop, the art instruction and the interviews, 2 very different types of activity. Having never been to the courthouse before, we found the venue was a labyrinth of rooms, none really large enough to accommodate either the instruction nor intimate enough to conduct interviews. Many of their rooms were dank and damp, and the whole building had an oppressive atmosphere. As a colonial courthouse within Tasmania, the building was dilapidated and dark. Having done the initial setup the evening before, we thought we were ready to go. But just before participants started arriving, one of our team members received a phone call from home. His wife had gone into premature labour and was in hospital. Our team member needed to leave immediately. We were 1 team member down. As participants arrived, we did our best to register each one to get the consent form signed quickly to enable the documentation and interviews to occur. Consent of the participants was a condition of our research ethics process. We try to do this in the online registration process to expedite this, but this is not always possible. Next, I will take a moment to briefly describe several of the participants that led to a very difficult and challenging workshop. We didn't have any of these details prior to their arrival on the day. Gloria's human was in a wheelchair with severe physical disability. He had recently lost Gloria, who had been a lifelong companion. Gloria's human attended the workshop to honour Gloria. Gloria's human was incredibly emotional about Gloria, but also very hard on himself in terms of what he wanted to achieve in the workshop. His needs were demanding, particularly about learning painting techniques, as he wanted to capture something quintessentially special about Gloria. Throughout the day, Gloria's human wavered between high emotion and anger and frustration at his skill level. Coco's human joined us from the local nursing home. She arrived with the help of an aide and with a walking frame. The aide did not stay for the workshop. Coco's human had limited hearing. She required personalised attention in all aspects of the instruction, and she was unable to move around the room or go to the bathroom unassisted. While we aimed to be inclusive, the building was old and it was limited to accommodate participants with mobility issues. Woody's human was very vivacious, with a dominant personality. Some might call her loud. She was also very interested in the youngest male member of our team. She was flirty and forward. This flirtation escalated to harassment when she cornered him while being interviewed. One participant arrived late. They did not have a pet to paint and were in a distressed and abusive state before entering the workshop. With hindsight, it appears they were experiencing a mental health episode. Throughout the workshop, this participant had severe outbursts, which included hurtling expletives, as well as bursting into tears and wailing. When they did participate in the workshop, they scooped up handfuls of paint and smeared them over the canvas and at one time onto themselves. Our emerging artist encouraged them to remove themselves from the small workshop room when they became overwhelmed. They then rejoined the workshop until another outburst occurred. This pattern continued throughout the day. As we wrapped up the workshop, the owner of the courthouse dropped by. As an influential community figure, he was well known to this participant and was dismayed with their behaviour. He was seemingly offended by the disruptive behaviour and proceeded to berate them, yelling and abusing them until the participant crouched in the corner in tears. He then ordered them outside, where they sat in their car crying. With hindsight, the project team should have been more aware of this participant's behaviour. They registered late, could not load up pictures of their pet to the online registration system, and they were abusive to team members early on. Our desire to be inclusive and register as many participants as possible meant that we overlooked these early warning signs. Our established artists seemed to be indifferent in being in the workshop. They were not interested in supporting the participants, nor interested in demonstrating any techniques. They made disparaging side comments to the participants about myself as I was demonstrating techniques such as, "She's not a very good painter." And they seemed unwilling to offer or engage with the participants in any form. So, summing up the challenges of the Swansea workshop, we had the largest number of participants to date. We had the most diverse participants, including neurodiversity, disability, age, and gender representation. We had to manage a serious mental health episode during the workshop. A team member was harassed by a participant. The workshops were run out of a private facility in which the infrastructure and the facilities were unknown prior to arriving, although we did check this upon booking the venue. And there were issues with the physical space. There are not enough room or tables, and the general feel of the venue was not conducive to a positive experience. Our selection of the established artists did not support the workshop aims, and we were one team member down. And while the workshop continued and we completed it, several of the workshop participants wrote to us formal emails complaining about the disruptions and the less than ideal circumstances. And although complimentary about the intent of the workshop, the resources, and the project itself, this was where we decided this needed to be looked at further. Later in the evening, following the workshop, we received a notice that our team member's wife had given birth to their second son, 12 weeks premature. One or two of these challenges could have been reasonably managed. We had ethics approval, consent forms, and completed risk assessments. However, the accumulation of these challenges in one event meant the experience was incredibly stressful and unsatisfying to both the project team and other participants. There are limitations to ethics processes in that the processes is aimed at protecting participants from adverse effects resulting out of the research, but not necessarily from behaviours from other participants. The ethics process also did not cover the well-being of the project team members. In order to continue the workshop tour and complete the project, we needed to change the model to address how compounding incidences could be alleviated. To do this, we needed to clarify our own expectations for what constituted a meaningful positive engagement with the workshop and its outcomes. We discussed and learnt about our tolerances. We discussed within what bounds, both personally and professionally, we were prepared to continue, including the non-negotiables for our own safety and well-being. We also needed to determine what would make the project sustainable, not in an economic sense, but sustainability as defined by community benefit, the purpose and value of taking learning activities outside of the academy into the community, and the sustainability of team members and our tolerances. To address a new model, our first objective was to deliver a firmer framework. This included new protocols in delivery, building strategic partnerships, and being more strategic in our selection of artists. We reworked our model and developed resources such as refined workshop running sheets, a website with video with instructions of the tutorials and techniques, and incident level risk assessments and protocols. Such protocols included interviews needed to be conducted in a public area or in view of other team members. Another initiative was to readdress the registration process. We added emergency contact details for all participants. The emergency contact needed to be contactable and available during the workshop if the participant was unable to continue or needed support for any reason. We also built better relationships and partnerships with the community, in particularly with community-based institutions. We contacted groups or cultural institutions as our support partner. We no longer use private venues, and all subsequent workshops were hosted in partnership with that local institution. These included regional galleries, local councils, or a community group. This meant that we had ongoing support of people and at hand during the workshop delivery. We also tightened our criteria on the selection of artists. They had to be committed to community engagement and be from and an active member of their own community. In building better relationships and partners, we also reached out to the local mental health support systems and the local police to let them know when and where we will be conducting workshops. In reassessing our model, we had to be very clear about what was non-negotiable in terms of our project outcomes and what we were prepared to surrender in terms of content and framework. Some of the new protocols meant that we were not always able to interview participants, which had implications on our data collection. To address this shortfall, we developed a short written survey that could be handed out during the workshop. And while this data is very different from recorded interviews and videos, we were still able to draw conclusions from the outcomes. We insisted on recording the workshop outcomes through good photographic documentary of the painted work, as well as photographic portraits of the participants. We also had been unwavering on including an emerging and established artist and paying them appropriate rates. However, this had been in greater consultation with our local contacts in the local areas. A good example of this was having a highly respected community member as our emerging artist, although they had limited experience in painting. We also concluded that our data collection was not the priority of the project. The aim of the project was to build social connection and cohesion through a skills-based pedagogical model and provide an enriching experience to communities through hands-on art activities. Our focus was always on providing a positive experience within the art workshop and building connection between the participants. In highlighting this aim, we have continued and subsequently completed our project without further incident. We don't have as many interviews or data as we originally planned, but we have connected with over 150 participants across our state. We realised that small participant numbers in some communities was not a barrier to good outcomes. The impacts, in fact, were arguably better. We did build a community of established and emerging artists that are connected to the project and have ongoing connections with the school. All of them have been given the resources and the materials to continue running workshops in their communities. What we did achieve is provide an opportunity for our participants to learn new skills and find a rewarding experience through art. Many of the participants had never painted before, and with our refocus model, we had made sure that what was non-negotiable in our project was that every participant would leave the workshop feeling a great sense of achievement, having learned something, and that they also left with a finished portrait of their pet. Thank you very much.